Hi, I'm Cody Hendrickson again. We're going to take a little bit more on class design. Specifically, we're going to start talking about how the default constructor and the overloaded constructors work. We were working with the idea of a DebugDuck, so we saw originally how a Java file itself is constructed. We then talked about the data members earlier. So now let's go ahead and take a look at the default constructor and see how that's put together. Marker. So we have right here the data members that belong to our DebugDuck, and our DebugDuck is this cute little object right here. It's a lovely duck. It keeps track of things. We ask it questions. It gives us information. It gives us hints, all sorts of stuff. But when we're talking about our class design, we need to make it so we have that information so we can initialize the values. When we're talking about Java data members, when we have a data member itself, all data members initialize either to 0, false, or null because that's the default value for every value inside Java. And so we have to make sure that when we give a DebugDuck, we want to give values that make sense or are appropriate for it rather than relying on the default values. We do that inside our default constructor or generic constructor. And the way that looks, it looks like this. Constructors are always going to be used with public as the visibility keyword. A public, because everyone can see the constructor. We want to be able to call this and create it as necessary. The next thing we have when we're talking about our constructor is it's going to be the same name as the class. Now notice right here that when we're talking about a DebugDuck, we do not have a return type right here. So when we're talking about a constructor, it's simply the visibility, then the name of the class. And then of course, because it's the default constructor or the generic constructor, there are no parameters that we're assigning to it, and so it simply looks like that. The first thing I like to do when I'm talking about a constructor is I like to go through and initialize my data members in the order I find them in my declaration section. So I'll use that as a way to actually go through and start off with that. So again, I go this dot, and the name of the data member, and this is listening. And I want to initialize my isListening to be true because my DebugDuck, when I first create it, it's always listening. It is there to be my friend. It's there to listen to me and help me get information on how I can better solve my problems. So my default value for a DebugDuck when I create it is listening is set to true. So again, I'm not using the automatic default value that's assigned by all Booleans to be false. No, I want it explicitly be true because my DebugDuck, it listens to me. It's my friend. And so I use this dot right here. This dot is how I can talk about the current object right now, the one I'm in the file of. In this case, it's a DebugDuck. And I'll use that through all of my projects in Java every time I'm working with them. And I'll do my next one. This dot has answer. Now, even though the default value of a Boolean is false, I like to explicitly call it out right here because I know that when I'm creating my object, I'm explicitly assigning those values to it. So when I assign a value to it, I do it for every single one, even if it has the accepted default value of that object. I want to explicitly call it out because that way I know as the developer of the software, when I'm writing the code I'm designing it, I know what I'm actually assigning. And I'll do this for every single one of these. So let's do that really fast. We'll just go to the next line so we can keep track of it a little bit differently. So now you can see right here we have our DebugDuck default constructor has the open and close parens with no parameters because again that's how we designate as the generic or the default constructor. I initialize every single data member I have listed already over here with this dot followed by the data member name and the value I'm assigning to it. Now again I'm assigning isListening to be true because my duck always listens when I start off. My this dot has answer set to false because it doesn't have the answer yet because I haven't talked to it. It doesn't know what I'm looking at or questions I'm asking. This dot question and answered, I'll set that to 0. This dot percent correct, I'll send it to 1.00. It automatically starts out with 100%. It's going to be right the first time. We'll only have to go down if we need to. This dot color, magenta, because this is my cute little magenta duck. And this dot name equals new string, passing it in parens, ducky. So when I use this right here, I have a string literal for magenta. And I'm using the regular constructor approach where I'm using a new, and then what type, it's a string, followed by parens and the value I'm attaching to it, in this case ducky. So I'm attaching that same thing. Both of these assign a new value to that string that belongs to that data member. I'm using a string literal for the color and a new string for the name. I could do it both as literals, it'd be totally fine. And we'll talk more about that another time, but it works either way. So I can either a string literal or a string with a constructor. They both work just fine. And we have that working just fine. So right here we have my DebugDuck default constructor, my generic constructor. And this makes every duck look like this. And they're all named Ducky, they're all magenta, they all have 100% correct. And so if I make a bunch of them, I have a whole bunch of DebugDucks that are all the exact same. Oops, I dropped one. Oh dear. So when I talk about this, when I use the default constructor, I only get magenta ducks named Ducky. However, I've got a duck right here for one of my students that has a different color. It's a different name, and it's a more traditional yellow duck, but that's okay. And so in order to make that other duck happen, I have to have the ability to do something beyond this. I have to have a constructor where I can specify values that I can use and do more with that. And that's what we're going to talk about when we talk about overloaded constructors. And we'll take a look at that in the next video. Thanks again, and have a great day. We'll come back again and take a look at how we can do debug ducks using an overloaded constructor for our next video. Thanks. Bye.